David, we want to find out something about Baylor football. It's certainly the trajectory is straight up in the air, it appears. Dave Aranda took over a couple of years ago, defensive guru from LSU, 2-7 during that strange COVID year, but shot to the top of the Big 12 with a stellar performance at the goal line against Oklahoma State, of course, in the championship game. And now for the first time in 7 years, the Big 12 media said, this is the team to beat.
Yeah, they had that run, fourth, fifth, 6 years, whatever it was, in 2010. They made a bowl game first time in forever. Then they had the RG3 Heisman. That's when they kind of got on the map. And then 13 and 14, they were really good. Heck, I thought 15 was their best team, but they got kind of derailed because of quarterback injuries and the depth. And then 16 was going to be a fantastic year. And we know what happened with that. Bryles got fired, and they were good, but they couldn't finish, and finally with the bowl win. But, yeah, they've earned it. Oklahoma State earned it to me. I know it's easy, and it's like almost constant that after so many years, Oklahoma, it would not have surprised me, even with all the newness of what they have, if a lot of people, and in fact, they had the second most first-place votes. But, yeah, Baylor earned it, and that doesn't mean you always win a media poll. Not that the poll matters, but I think it says a lot about the respect for how well they played last year, who they were, how they played. And they lose a lot of people, but the Dave Aranda factor right now, it's like the old top 40 Billboard magazine when records were shooting up the top, they had the big bullet aimed at the top, and that's kind of who they are. Can they repeat? It's easier to get there than it is to stay there.
David, maybe this speaks to the progression of the program in regards to depth, that who would guess that a Baylor would win the Big 12? Not that that's a surprise, but that the starting quarterback, Gary Bohannon, would not be able to keep his job. And there's an open competition in spring practice, and he jumps into the transfer portal, and there's a new starting quarterback in Blake Shapen.
One thing we've learned from Dave Aranda, we didn't get to learn much the first year because it was a mess. And because of his style, the lack of being able to be like in front of players because of COVID and everything was a Zoom, and it was just kind of, some really good schools did not have good years, but I don't think anyone was more affected than he was because of his style of who he is and how he communicates with players. You have players, you have players, coaches, you have disciplinarians, you have the hammers. And then he's just different, man. He's as unique as anyone that I've ever met. I've gotten to interview him a lot, and I have to go in there prepared. Not that I wasn't for any interview from any of the coaches, but he is a unique guy, man. And like he even says, he even admits that he's kind of a little bit unique or different. I think you're right. Blake Shapen, when he came in against Kansas State, when Bohannon went down with the hamstring, he didn't miss a beat. His first snap, Jeff Grimes, they threw a pass. And I think that says a lot. You see teams get real timid and hand it off. I think they were winning at the time. I can't remember exactly where it was. But, let's just be real conservative, let the defense win, which is kind of who they've been, even under Matt Rule. They came out and started winging it. He gained confidence. The team all of a sudden realizes we can do some things, and we saw what he did. It's unfortunate he didn't get to play in the Sugar Bowl, but at the same time, what he did in the first half against Oklahoma State was mind-boggling. It was almost as flawless of a first half by any quarterback in America last year, and I'm not trying to overshadow Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud or anyone else, but it was mind-boggling. And he's really, really good. He's got that it factor, that it in his neck. And now the question is, can he remain upright? If he does, they're going to be pretty good despite losing a lot of weapons.
Baylor's recruiting class right now is what? It's either, I think it's second in the Big 12, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's behind. Yeah, it's behind Texas. It's probably, depending on which one. I don't look too much at this time, but they've had a nice little June. They had a great June. I think it's 7th, 8th, 9th or something like that. They'll end up, like right now, Michigan's like 40th. Alabama's well down the list, and they'll get their 3 or 4 5-stars here whenever they want to. But if they end up in the top 25 with what they've done without rankings or high classes, they're going to get back to very close to where Art Briles was about to be after they had won the Big 12 titles. But yeah, they're having a really good run, and it's not filled with a bunch of guys that you see on 3 or 247 or rivals like just slobber over. but they're good football players, and they're probably a slightly bit higher level prospects than before. But are they fits to what they do? And no different than what West Virginia has to do, or what TCU has to do, or Iowa State, or Baylor. You have to, you're not going to get many of those elite guys. You're going to get some, but you got to get what fits in your system. And yeah, they're having a really good run. They're not done, but they're pretty close to like early 20s as far as commitments. How many of them can they get to December and get them signed?
This is the statistic that I just so happen to know right off the top of my head based on spreadsheets that I create. But Baylor was one of a very small handful of schools that lost only a very small handful of players through the transfer portal. Yep. In your mind, what has Baylor done well to prevent the mass attrition that other schools are facing? Because it's not just West Virginia that's losing 20, it's everybody that's losing 20. And Baylor lost barely any. Yeah,
that's a great question. They lost Lovett back after the 2020 season to Penn State, and they had a couple others leave. They lost Gary Bohannon, but that was basically Dave Aranda doing what most coaches would never do. Hey, we're going to move forward, and we're going to give you a chance before the deadline after spring drills to decide what you want to do. Take your time. And, of course, Bohannon now is at the University of South Florida, and will be there, and I'm happy for him. Not a better person. Great teammate. All the things you would say was a major part of what they did last year. But the one thing about Dave Aranda is he can be, and I don't want to use the word cutthroat because that's not him at all. We saw what he did. Remember after the 2-7 season, he fired offensive coordinator Larry Fedora, the offensive line coach at Wickline. He fired a couple of others, the quarterbacks coach. I mean, within less than 2 or 3 days after the season ended. He is not afraid to make a business decision. And he did that. And I think in this particular case, if they want to be more than just a cute little story, if they want to be a team that wins the Big 12 and wins a Sugar Bowl or maybe has bigger aspirations, they have to make sure that they're constantly tweaking. And in this case, the quarterback position led to Bohannon leaving. I know you didn't ask me that part of it. I'm telling you, man, the guys there, winning helps, first of all. Secondly, Dave Aranda, I think, has the pulse of every single player in that locker room. Maybe there's 5 or 6 that aren't happy. Maybe there's 20. I think all of them, though, trust him. Charlie Brewer, when they were terrible at 2-7, he transferred to Utah. I like Charlie Brewer. He was a freaking warrior for the Baylor during those years when Matt Rule was there. They don't get to a bowl game in 2018 without him. They probably don't get to where they were in 19 to play for a Big 12 championship without him, even though that was a hell of a defense with a bunch of NFL players on it. He just seems to have a pulse. And that goes back to what I said earlier. I don't think anyone realizes how 2-7 affected everybody. Everybody. I mean, a lot of teams were not very good. But because of his style of how he relates to players, I think we realized last year how much he missed that one-on-one discussion and getting to know them. And it also was a disconnect with he and Charlie Brewer. Charlie Brewer was miserable. They were terrible. He got booed sometimes. Charlie Brewer was part of the heart and soul of that team in his first 3 years he took a beating his first 2 or 3 years at Baylor. And it still hurts Dave Aranda to this day that he could never really connect with Charlie Brewer. In the end, it was the best thing for Baylor because they moved on and they had a heck of a season last year without it. One of the other things, they lost a lot of players. And so it's like growing grass. You got to go in there sometimes, thatch it, or you got to cut it for the next part to come through. And they lost a lot of players. I mean, really good players. 6 players drafted, a bunch of others in the NFL at camps. And so that allows that youth that they have to get a chance. Now, if a lot of those guys would have stayed around, I don't know. Maybe they do lose more to the transfer portal. They lost R.J. Sneed. That's unfortunate because that's their weakest position right now at wide receiver going into the season. He's at Colorado. Great kid as well. But, I do know this, that Baylor has been through this before. West Virginia went through this about realignment last year, as did everybody else. As a guy who's covered Baylor since 2010, you had Nebraska, Missouri. I'll never forget. I'm going to take the job at the place in Waco. On my way back home, discussing it with, like kind of making calls and getting an idea about where I'm going to move to. Colorado and Nebraska are leaving. I'm about to go cover Baylor, who had been terrible, and I'm about to go cover them, and they might not be a Division I football program. They may not be in a Power 5. They may not be in the Big 12. That was discussed. You get through that, then you have A&M and Missouri leave, and here we go again. Texas is going to go to the Pac-12, etc. You get through that somehow. And then, of course, last year with Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC, and there we go. You guys experienced it. It was kind of, sometimes I didn't lose sleep over it, but you just never knew, because we love big-time college football, and you love covering big-time college football. And I don't even know what big-time college football looks like in 12 months. I don't know. So there's a little bit of nerves. There's no question, but I look at it this way. They're like a cat with 9 lives. They've found a way. The Big 12 has been the most rated conference you could imagine. The SEC hasn't been rated. I know back in the day, I think Tony's even told me that, Tulane was a part of the SEC, or what the Pac-12 used to be. The Big 10 hasn't lost anybody. Maryland left the ACC, and the Big East is gone, basically in football terms and whatever. And they just find a way. They just find a way. Some of it's been political, and some of it has been getting your hands and your elbows greasy and dirty and finding a way to get everybody to come together. One thing about with Texas leaving, as you guys know, this will be a much more united, one single type vision. You don't have to worry about somebody else making a phone call. And that doesn't mean that people aren't making calls. That doesn't mean E. Gordon Gee's not making calls. That doesn't mean Mac Rhodes is not making calls, or Dr. Livingstone, or anybody else. But Gene Taylor at Kansas State. But it's a united front. I talked to somebody yesterday that would know, and we're in. Now, I know that's hard to believe and trust anybody anymore right now in college athletics. There's a reason to be kind of like, I don't know. They are all in. You hear about West Virginia, ACC, Kansas in the Big 10, or Oklahoma State. That's a lot of more just social media, fan discussion, message board stuff, which is great. That's what we live for. But they are all in. And I just feel, because the ACC and that grant of rights, no matter what anyone can do about trying to get out of it, that's going to cost millions and a lot of legal fees, if that even happens. The Pac-12's wounded. A lot of really good schools in the Pac-12. I feel for them, because the Big 12's been through this before. But I just have a feeling that somehow, some way, even though there's not really a true blue blood in the conference, there's some good teams that beat the blue bloods, but there's no like alpha dog logo in the conference right now, that they're going to, again, find a way to be relevant. There's too much money out there that these schools are spending for them just to lay over and say, oh, okay, we're just going to give up.
I think you're right on that, Smokey. I think they're gonna find a way.
Yeah. I don't know really some of the back rooms, or here's one of the things we hear about, that so and so's been offered the Big 12. It's like Team XYZ whatever has been offered to join the Big 12. That's not true. I haven't really reported a lot on my Twitter account. I've done a little bit. I did this today. Anyone that thinks anyone's been now this is as of earlier today, that's been officially offered to join the Big 12. That's not true. Most everything going on right now is dialogue. That's a good word. But anything that's like, hey, this is what you get, this is what we want, you have 30 days to make a decision. No, it's not happening. Now, could that change this weekend? Colorado's having a meeting tonight again, another of the Board of Regents. It could change in a heartbeat. We are in a society now where USC, UCLA leave Thursday a week ago. Well, we want another story the next day. We want another story on Sunday. We want a story tomorrow. We want a story today. And social media just like thrusts that into our heads, right? And our minds are going crazy. Will there be offers? Will there? Yes, I would say so. But nothing has been like, hey, Utah or Arizona State or whoever, this is what we're going to do. I don't think any of that's been discussed. I think there have been, again, some dialogue, but that's about it to this point. And I don't know what's going to happen, but I still feel like too much work has come in. Too much work has been done to save the conference three times. And they find a way. there's some really proud schools, even though maybe they don't have the logos or they're not blue bloods or whatever. And I think they're going to scratch and claw and fight like hell to keep themselves alive.
Well, the president we just hired has some very real business acumen in the sports world. And, again, not a traditional college guy, but if you look at his resume, man, he's done some stuff. Former owner of the Brooklyn Nets, just all over it, everywhere. The Rock Nation connections to Jay-Z and his empire certainly can't hurt. I think it's a very good strategic hire for the conference.
The thing about the Brett Yormark, I had never heard of him. When I heard that name, it kind of reminded me when I heard Matt Rule was going to be the next Baylor football coach. Now, I understood Matt Rule. I kind of, I'd seen a couple of Temple games. They were a really good feel-good story. But it was like, what? I had never heard of this guy. Of course, I've heard of Rock Nation, so okay. Obviously, the Brooklyn Nets, although they're a mess. And then other things that he's done. And no one knew that no one, right, Tony? USC, UCLA, that was no one. I mean, you're tied into the Pac-12, is it? Nobody. It's almost like the Texas-Oklahoma thing. There were people at Texas and Oklahoma didn't know. Yeah. And the first day on the job, you might have this explosion again within college football. I think he is so outside the box that he might look at this and go, that makes sense. Instead of looking at this like, oh my God, we're all going to die, he might look, it's not Chinese to him. It might be, this is what I'm for. I'm going to find ways for us to make more money. We're going to find more ways to get money from streamers or whatever. We're going to make this happen. And we're going to put ourselves in a position where we're not going to be the one that gets beat down all the time. We're not going to be told that we're not Texas and Oklahoma. We're going to go out and we're going to be one. And I know this sounds, I'm not trying to do a pep talk here, but we're going to make it happen. We are going to make this happen. And then on top of that, then you go, okay, go save the conference because it's going to have to be saved again. I bet, he wasn't supposed to start till August the 1st. He's in the middle of it. I mean, his hands probably, would you love to see his cell phone bill, his laptop emails, and also his text messages? I know some of that, sounds like we're trying to do some investigation into somebody political, like a presidential nominee. But can you imagine what I'll tell you this story. And I was working back and forth with somebody within the Big 12 office, and I was asking about an interview for next week at Big 12 Media Days in Arlington. And he sent me a note. He goes, we're working on it. I'll get back with you. Then I get a text from him. It was not supposed to be to me. And it wasn't anything like nefarious or anything like, oh my God, there's the story. But it was, that their phones are blowing up. I one day wish someone would do a, try to find all that information, Freedom of Information Act on all of this. But I think they might have somebody so unique that it makes sense, if that's way to maybe make sense.
So is he already on the job, Smokey, even though his official start date's not till August 1st?
Yeah, that was the other part I was going to mention. That exactly right. It's supposed to start August the 1st. He's going to be introduced Wednesday morning, Big 12 Media Days in Arlington, 8:30 in the morning. Dr. Linda Livingstone, president at Baylor, board of governors with the Big 12, part of the transformational committee. She's a rock star right now. Right. She will introduce him, and that's about 8:30 Wednesday morning. They wouldn't introduce him if he wasn't already entrenched. Now, if this had not happened, the USC story, they probably still introduce him. But man, to start this thing with him, I mean, it's. Can you imagine? I mean, follow all the various Twitter accounts that you guys have, and people will be able to get all sorts of information. Yeah, he's very much involved, very much. And don't discount that Bob Bowlesby, and I know that people thought he was sleeping at the wheel and all that with Texas and Oklahoma. Bob Bowlesby is very much involved in this as well.
Because of his basketball connection with the Barclays Center, the Nets, that maybe, and I think this was somebody speculating. I don't think there was any fact to this at all. It was just somebody speculating that maybe his idea for the Big 12 was, okay, we'll continue to be a solid football conference and we'll get that $42 million a year or whatever the Big 12 gets. But we're going to focus on basketball and making it a stronger basketball conference because they're already arguably the best in the country. Let's strengthen that and capitalize on that. What would you say to that?
They are the best conference in America in basketball, and all the various analytics and data has said that now for probably 5 or 6 years in a row. I know that, Kansas won it last year and Baylor won it the year before, and I know that other conferences, the SEC and Big Ten and other ACCs got their history as well. Let's put it this way, if you add the 4 teams that have been the ones mainly rumored to join the Big 12, Arizona by themselves in basketball just makes the strongest conference in basketball even more amazing. Because we know, and they've already, they had to overcome their coach getting fired, and they were really good last year. Mm-hmm. And then, you got to look and see a little bit about the other. Oregon's been okay. They're not going to be a part of the Big 12. I don't see that myself. But why not? Football drives everything. But next in line is men's basketball. Mm-hmm. The more teams in the tournament, the more of those tokens you get of how much money you get for every team that keeps winning in the tournament. And last year, the Big 12 had a nice little run, even though Baylor got knocked out in the second round. Yes, why not how about this? And I know Kansas City just signed up for like another 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and it's a great place for the tournament. People can complain all they want. Well, it's an unfair advantage. Well, okay, we're going to do it there. Where else are you going to do it? Because they've done it in Dallas before, and it wasn't the same. And if it wasn't for Arkansas back in the days of the Southwest Conference, that arena would not have been filled because the Hogs fans went nuts. I mean, they were there all over the place. Why not? I mean, Bob Huggins' team was down last year, but it's West Virginia. It's Bob Huggins, Jerry West, and all the history you have there on top of everybody else. Why not make it elite in both? Because that's where all the money is. All the other things, none of them exist without government, Title IX and all that, but none of them really exist if you don't have the money coming in the pipeline. And that's why the football money is so important, and so is the basketball, getting teams in the tournament.
And I know this is a football show, Mark, so I apologize for the basketball questions, but I think it ties in. But in that article, they even said, hey, why not go get Gonzaga to join the Big 12 as a basketball-only member, right? And you really elevate that basketball to even another. You get Arizona and Gonzaga in there. Think about that.
Well, then you might have 4 of the 5, 6 best teams in America if they're all where they're supposed to be: Kansas, Baylor, Gonzaga, Arizona. One of the other I was going to bring up. How about this? He has this tie into Barclays Center. Kansas City is again the home of the Big 12 tournament, and it should be. How about somehow sliding one of them for the folks at West Virginia, Cincinnati, UCF, or whoever else joins the conference? Why not play one of them regionally up in New York or Brooklyn?
Yeah, I thought just the same thing.
Not very often, but if he has this tie-in, why not change that up at least once on occasion? The Big 12 championship games, it was St. Louis, it was Kansas City, then they moved it around, and now it's where it is at AT&T Stadium. It was in San Antonio, it's been in Houston. In some of those places, it was better than others. There's nothing wrong with looking at options, and this guy has this business acumen, the entrepreneurial type background that he has. I wouldn't put it past him that one day they play that thing in Vegas if he can find a way to get that done in Vegas. Yeah. Why not? Now the Pac-12 or the other conferences out west, well, you have Brigham Young, you might have Utah, you might have Arizona State. Why not Vegas?
Hey, why not have Jay-Z open for the Big 12 championship game?
And T-Mobile Arena might be open.
There you go. I agree.
Something I read on the internet. It might be open.
One of the things that I was told, not by Brett Yormark, I have never met him. I didn't know him. I won't see him until Wednesday. Is somebody had told me that had worked with him is all these things like in college football, nothing is sacred. Nothing right now is sacred. And what I mean by that with him is all of the things that we've always done the certain way, there will be some things that will not be done that way anymore, because if it's all going to be about not the eyeballs that we hear about marketing, making us, the Big 12, whoever us is, making us, we are this and promoting what the good things are rather than, oh, we don't have a logo and we're not Texas and Oklahoma, because that was shoved down people's throats. In a lot of ways it should have been.
Well, and Smokey, I think it's a strength of him coming in that he has no feelings of the past. Just
when
it's
I came
irrelevant
in,
to him.
yeah, when I came into Waco in 2010, they had a radio station, had a great signal, and it was just, in my opinion, and one of the reasons that I was asked to come do something was the sales were way down, really down. And I've always been a part of sales along with being a broadcaster. Who can sell you better than you, right? If you're a talk show host or whatever. Secondly, well, this is what we used to do, or this is what we did in the 4 o'clock hour, or this, and I put up a note on my door. I will listen to anybody who wants to come and ask me or talk to me about what we need to do or should do, but don't ever use, well, this is the way we used to do it, because I'm done. That doesn't mean we didn't keep some of the things the way they used to do it. I had an older guy that came in, he goes, well, we used to do all this. I go, done. And it wasn't being heartless or being arrogant or anything like that. It was just that the way we used to do it. Brett Yormark, the way we used to do it is out the window because we don't have anything. We don't have any idea what he might do. Will they keep some of the great things? Yes. But I think there's going to be a lot of things that he goes in and changes. It could be even things that aren't like in front of us that will be changed once he arrives.
Right. Things we never see as fans.
Yeah, and he can be tough. That's one of the things I had somebody tell me because I didn't know. Again, I didn't know him. He can be kind of a turd now. I mean, he's not afraid to let everyone know who's in charge. Now he'll have to have a nice, hopefully peaceful transition, but he is not afraid to put his stamp on something, no matter what maybe others, because it's his job. It's his legacy now. Chuck Ninus came in and saved the Big 12 from the Dan Beebe letting Texas walk all over him. And then you had Bowlesby come in, and despite some ups and downs, last year, just by what he did with the 4 schools being added and surviving, and Tony, we used to talk about it all the time with you, somehow they survived that. That, to me, is his legacy rather than Texas and Oklahoma walking out the door, because that's the part that kept the conference afloat.
And I think their conference is going to be stronger without them.
Yeah, well, I think they'll be able to
unified together.
Everybody can grow. Everyone can feel like, oh, I'm allowed to talk in this meeting. And I may be exaggerating that. With Yormark, I think what's going to happen is that he understands that the way it's been working and some of the things the Big 12 has done before has not worked. That's why you're getting picked apart. And most of it is over money and egos, right? Well, if everybody's is truly equal in that room, the egos are out the door. And that's already happened with Brigham Young and Cincinnati and Houston and UCF. I use this example all the time, and people go, oh, my God, here he goes again. If the SEC can have the philosophy, Roy Kramer was originally the commissioner, and then it was Slive, and then it's now Sankey. If the SEC, the strongest college football conference in America for the last several years, if they can say we are as strong as our weakest link, then the Big 12 is going to make sure that's the way they are as well, which they could never really do when Texas was in the room. Couldn't do it. You couldn't do it. The NFL, the most powerful league in America, right? $billion business. The Cowboys are the most valuable sports franchise in the NFL. They're the Yankees of the NFL, except they haven't won. The Yankees have won more recently. But if they can say, hey, we're as good as the Arizona Cardinals, we're as strong as everybody equal when it comes to revenue sharing. If Jerry Jones, who blanks money, eats money, sleeps money, if he can understand that, he can make his other money outside of that part of it. But if he can understand that the Packers or the Cardinals or Seattle or whoever need and get the same amount as he does when it comes to the television revenue, then why couldn't the Big 12 do that for the longest of time, even though they finally started doing that? And guess what? Texas got jealous because A&M started making a lot of money. And so, wait a minute, we don't like this anymore.